today. Welcome to another review. It's not a good one. I'm gonna tell you that now. There are some films that you can really kind of gauge what you're in for based on the poster, and it was specifically the photoshopped skeletons hanging around the title that kind of made me go, yeah, this isn't going to be good. Before I get into this review, I just want to say that I talk about Native American culture and folklore. This is based on my research over the years and things that I have been told from friends who are Native American. So if there is anything that I have gotten wrong or I've made a mistake about, and you are an expert in that area, being potentially Native American yourself, please comment below and correct me, because I'm trying to be accurate, and if I do get something wrong, I would like to know what I got wrong. So just going into that, so let's begin the review. Skinwalker is a 2021 American horror western film written and directed by Robert Conway. In it, after looting a Native American burial site, a hunter unleashes the legendary Skinwalker, a shape-shifting demon, onto an unsuspecting world. So back in 2017, I watched a film called The Covenant, not Alien Covenant, just The Covenant, also by Robert Conway, and not to sound cruel, but it is still to this day one of the worst films I have ever seen. When I signed up to watch this film, I didn't know it was by Robert Conway because I like to go into these blind. As soon as I found out, I can't describe the trepidation I felt, and that feeling was spot on, because this film, in my opinion, is not good and I think should be avoided by all Native American people. I mean, they've suffered enough and this just isn't helping. I'll start with a couple of pros, which are that the production quality, for the most part, is actually pretty good. It's a far cry better than what The Covenant was. And yes, I know these are all independent films. I know they're working on a tight budget. But at this point, we've seen top quality films made just using iPhones as cameras. So there are only so many excuses for cringy camera shots. But I think it was cool how they wanted to film it in Arizona, featuring actors and crew from Arizona and basically support the region. I think that was a lovely thing, and I think they picked a pretty good location for it. Most of the performances are good. Some are really good, some are mediocre, and then some are cringeworthy. But most of the time were actually good, and I'd say very nice work, guys, 2 thumbs up. I wouldn't say anything was wow or memorable, but visually it looked at least competent. There were moments I forgot it was an indie film, until someone started talking. The main issues, like with The Covenant, are in the script itself. The story is weak, painfully dragged out, full of irrelevant character stories and details, and it does a great disservice to the Native American people. Before I get into plot specifics, I want to stress that in reality, hardly anything happened in this film. One thing happened in the first few minutes, and then nothing pertaining to skinwalkers or this film's version of them occurs until 40 minutes into the film. And then after that, it's all sporadic. For the majority of the film, we're following 2 different storylines with 2 sets of characters. Now, obviously, they will intersect at some point, but for 40 minutes, I'm watching 2 stories being depicted, none of which relate to each other at all, nothing interesting, and nothing about the curse either. There are so many unnecessary characters and sexless plot points that serve no purpose. The film honestly just consists of a bunch of characters talking about whatever random shit pops in their heads for an hour, and it's not interesting in the slightest. It took 5 hours to get through this. We're introduced to a character who speaks Native American. Which Native American language though? We have no idea. He's there just for translation purposes, but they could have given that to any character. For no good reason in the story, he has 3 wives and one is 13. I know this is the 1800s, but just because something possibly took place 200 years ago doesn't mean you have to have it in your movie, especially when it doesn't enhance the story. A woman is arrested and we go from one scene where she is dressed to the next scene where she is forced to walk by the marshals in her underwear, meaning a corset and a skirt. Where did her dress go? Why was she suddenly deprived of her clothes? They just took her dress away for no reason, and then by the end of the film, she's still walking around town in her underwear, and no one cares. Women weren't allowed to do that. That would have been seen as indecent. I just don't know why either of these things were in the film when they had nothing to do with anything. If it had an impact on the story, then that's one thing, but it doesn't. It's just there, and I don't agree with writing sexism for the sake of sexism. It's stupid and poor storytelling. The subtitling of whatever language was being spoken was bad. The subtitles did not sync up with who was speaking. Sometimes they would be missing, sometimes there were no subtitles at all. They might appear after a person was done speaking, and because they weren't in sync, I wasn't sure who was being translated. I mean, you have 3 Native American characters who honestly don't do a goddamn thing in this film, and when they first speak, or when we first meet them, there are no subtitles, so no idea what they're saying. I am not sure if all 3 were actual Native Americans. I think 2 were, because their IMDb says they have been in a few other films where they are playing either Apache or Navajo characters, so I guess they're a bit typecast. But the 3rd person, I don't know. I do know the face paint they gave him was just sad. This was him. And I was looking up traditional face paint of natives and I couldn't find a single thing that resembled this except for this. Yeah, it seems this film replicated Johnny Depp's Tonto, and for the record, this image of Tonto was inspired by this painting. But the thing is, this painting was done by a white guy, who said the face paint in the painting is not specific to any tribes, and he specifically did this design so it didn't resemble any tribes. So it feels like everyone is just replicating a design that was invented by a white guy for an imaginary Native American. Good job! The film sees a man rob the body of a dead Native American on a Native American burial ground. Now, the film takes place in the Arizona high country, and I'm not entirely sure if this specific piece of land in the film is Apache land or Navajo land, Hopi land or Zuni. It seems these are the tribes of this area and a couple others, but I'm not sure what applied in the 1880s. There is mention of Apache and Navajo, but at no point are we told specifically which tribe we're dealing with. I don't think they actually cared at all. It really felt there was no respect or attempt to understand or properly depict this very specific part of Navajo culture. There is all this emphasis on the white characters, and the 3 random Native American characters all feel like an afterthought. Another reason I feel this is because the burial ground and how it was set up was in keeping with Sioux tribes and their traditions, and they occupied some of the northern part of the US and a bit of Canada, and their death traditions were vastly different to the Navajo. So we've got a Navajo entity, but a Sioux burial ground. I'm confused. Skinwalkers are a part of Navajo culture, but their neighbor tribes like Pueblo, Apache, Hopi, Ute, and others have their version of Skinwalkers, I believe. But from what Native American friends have told me, it still all involves an evil witch who can transform into an animal. These people could be male or female, but were more commonly male. So a Skinwalker is either an evil witch or a healer who turned evil. There are some variations on how one becomes a Skinwalker, but ultimately the individual acquires the power to turn into animals, usually coyotes, wolves, foxes, cougars, dogs, and bears. And it's believed if you looked in the eyes of a Skinwalker, the witch could possess you and make you say and do anything they wanted. But their animal forms didn't look like normal animals, and they spent their time doing evil or dark deeds. It's hard to find clear details on Skinwalkers because on one hand the Navajo people don't like to mention them as they fear it invites them in, and on the other hand they just don't like sharing this stuff with outsiders. And I can't blame them, because as soon as you do, someone misinterprets your beliefs and makes them into a shitty movie like fucking 2006's Skinwalkers, which was literally about fucking white people who turned into werewolves, and yet that film still tried to say it's the same damn thing. A lichen is not a Skinwalker and an Italian is not a Navajo, but I digress. The reason I'm saying all this is because while they got some underlying aspects of Skinwalkers, such as possession and a healer who turned evil correct, what we really ended up getting was zombies. They were zombies. I mean, you're telling me they're possessed, but they're the very essence of what a zombie is, and a Skinwalker and a zombie are not the same fucking thing. See, most of the time, I am of the belief that we should not reinvent mythological beings if those beings are attached to a race's culture and traditions. Skinwalkers are part of Navajo culture and folklore, so for me, that's a big do not touch. Unless the person doing so is Navajo, and I don't think Conway is, but I don't know his heritage, and that's not my place to look up his ancestry on Ancestry.com. If you say shapeshifter, there's more leg room because that is founded in a lot of cultures and has many interpretations. I don't know, it's a case-by-case basis. Point is, in this film, a dead, nondescript female Native American has her elder death totem stolen from her dead body. Now I searched all over Google and could not find elder death totems as being a thing. If a Native American is watching this, please tell me if this is a thing, because I went all the way to page 10 of Google and didn't get a single hit. The film says only highly respected individuals of the highest honor are buried with these. Insert never-ending list of contradictions here. So we're told that this person was a powerful and highly respected individual who united the Navajo and Apache tribes and brought them to this land to live together in harmony, which seems weird because Navajo and Apache are descended from the same tribe already. Anyway, at some point she became corrupted and became evil, so the chief formed a revolt against her and they killed her, and as they did this, she placed a curse in revenge. So far this part is semi-sane. When the white dude stole her necklace, which I'm not sure why she should still have it if she basically lost her status, but her spirit became enraged and summoned a Skinwalker, a demon that can shapeshift. So far we're not very in keeping with the Skinwalker legends, but this is where we get into zombie territory. So white guy steals totem, but the other white guy who was like, nah bro, that's not cool, gets bitten by a rattlesnake that was either the spirit of the chick or was just sent by the chick or was irrelevant, I don't know, but he dies. Then he comes back from the dead as this zombie-esque person. He sheds his friend's blood, and so the curse, or if you ask me, infection, passes from him to the other guy. Then he dies and comes back from the dead, he scratches some other chick, she turns, and so on and so forth. It's amazing how this Skinwalker curse involves no one actually depicted as possessed, no one turning into an animal, just nothing in common with the legends at all. We just have a curse that is spread like a frickin' STD because it needs blood-to-blood contact. But then, in the end, they need to perform some really weak-ass ritual and return the totem to appease the spirit. Oh, but in doing so, they summon her spirit from the latest victim, which would indicate he was possessed. This was all giving me a fucking headache. We have a film about Native Americans and Native American lore, but there is no care put into their story or their characters in the script of this film, and they basically plucked the most common legend of this race they could think of, went with their general idea of what it was, and then made up the rest. They instead chose to focus on all these white characters, none of whom are interesting, none are worth following, and most of them aren't doing anything. Even when people were shot or stabbed, they were taking forever to die. I was begging for these people to hurry up and die. Everything goes at a slow pace in this film. It was not a horror film by any means. It feels like a Western adventure film because it follows that story of people on horseback journeying over the mountains, and that is the main focus of this story for most of the film. I think even calling it a Western is generous. I understand it's set in that time period and they were Western characters, but you could see parts of the costumes that were modern. It didn't feel very authentic. Overall, it was an extremely tedious film that should probably apologize to Native Americans. Some good performances and some decent camera moments don't make up for an abysmal script and a story that made no sense. I'm hardly an expert to really be talking about Native American tribes and their customs and traditions and the varying changes between each tribe. That's not my area of expertise. What I know is very minimal, but I do try to listen when people talk. And I listen when I hear other people of other races and things like that talk about how they are depicted in cinema. And Native Americans have really been given the shaft in films. I mean, people of color in general have, but you know, Native Americans, you know, it's bad enough they had the whole genocide thing. Add that to the fact that basically Hollywood just wants to keep adding insult to injury. I can't help not look at that perspective and see that this really could have been an opportunity if someone cared enough. Like if it was me, I would have really tried to study, call up someone. If we're filming in Arizona, it would not be hard to reach out to one of the reservations, to ask one of the tribe leaders from around those areas, hi, I'm writing this film, could you please help me? These things are not impossible and they don't cost you any money. Time and effort, that's all it is. And so I get annoyed when it's like, could you not be bothered to reach out to any of these people and just ask for help, ask for tips and details, like what are your burial traditions, which, like I said, from what I understand, that was not a Navajo burial at all. It did look like Sioux, because Sioux, from what I know, they would often bury a person on like a scaffold about like 8 feet above the ground, and they would often keep the body there for about a year. Whereas the Navajo, like, again, this is from my own personal research, very superstitious, didn't want to spend too much time around the body. It's like, do what you gotta do, bury it, limited people touching it, bury the body, be done. I learned that from reading several articles on Google from Native American websites, not websites by white people, but websites that are done by Native Americans, because I want to go to the source. And this was their information, and I'm just like, if it took me like 2 minutes on Google, what's your excuse? It just felt lazy, and I don't appreciate laziness in script writing when research is free. But anyway, I had seen, by some chance I did actually stumble upon another review of this film, and that person gave it like a B-. They're like, it's a zombie western horror film, it's so good, it's so entertaining. I'm like, wow, I feel like we watched two vastly different films. But that just goes to show that just because I did not like it does not mean that everybody would dislike it. So if you come across this film and it sounds intriguing or appealing to you, then definitely give it a go. And if you have already seen it or you plan to, just comment down below and share your thoughts on it. But yep, those are my thoughts. But that's it for this video. Everybody take care wherever you are. Stay happy, stay healthy, watch lots of movies, and I hope to see you in my next one. So until then, bye!